key battleground states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. The bottom line is this. If you have any idea, if you're a Kamala Harris fan and you want to rip open the champagne bottle, pop that cork, do not do it. Donald Trump is very much in this race. If we have a polling shift like we've seen in prior years from now until the final result, Donald Trump would actually win. I'm not saying that's going to happen.
So obviously there's been a lot of talk about the polls lately from the demoralization agents, right? And what are they saying? Kamala Harris is destroying Trump in the polls. It's over. Republicans should be panicking. And look, I think it's important to discern the hype from the reality. So what's true and what's not true? Well, what is true is that should we be concerned about the polls? Yes, absolutely. This is undeniably going to be a close election. We should take no reason to get complacent, and we should not entirely write off what we are seeing. But on the other hand, should we be completely buying into what we are seeing? Should we be panicking about it? And my answer there is also no, because first of all, I don't see what constructive good that panicking will do for anyone, right? People do not make good or sound or rational decisions when they're freaking out or running around like headless chickens. That's number one. But also number two, there are legitimate reasons to believe why some of what we are seeing from the polls should be taken with a grain of salt. And of course, people are going to say that, Vince, you're coping about that. Oh, you're just seeing numbers you don't like, so you're saying they're fake. It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they're skewed largely because of potential things like the honeymoon phase, response bias, and the current enthusiasm surge that is not going to last all the way to November. But don't take my word for it. If you don't believe me, if you want to say I'm coping about that, then take the very words of CNN, whose polling analyst today came out and reiterated many of the things that I just said there in that opening. We'll react to it, talk about it today, folks. If you enjoy the content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are new so you can support the content. But without further ado, again, you don't have to take my word for it. Take CNN's word about the polls themselves. Check it out.
From viral moments to big crowds at rallies, the surge in enthusiasm for Kamala Harris's presidential campaign has translated to higher polling numbers. But our senior data reporter, Harry Enton, is here to remind us it is still way too soon to count the other candidate, Donald Trump, out. We're just under 3 months to the election. How much does enthusiasm predict what's going to happen at the polls?
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, the thing that we put out those poll numbers yesterday, you know, New York Times, Siena College, we covered them. I showed you the Ipsos polling, all of which that showed Kamala Harris with clear momentum, enthusiasm potentially on her side. But I just want to take a step back and sort of point out we've kind of been here before. So August 13th, how far were the polls off in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin? And this is in 2016 and 2020. Trump was estimated both times around and by significant margins. Take a look here. In 2016, the average poll in those states that I mentioned, those Great Lake battleground states, Trump was underestimated by 9 points on average at this point in 2016. How about 2020? It wasn't a one-off. Look at this. He was underestimated by 5 points on average. And of course, Kamala Harris's advantage in those New York Times, Siena College polls were 4 points in each of these key battleground states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. The bottom line is this. If you have any idea, if you're a Kamala Harris fan and you want to rip open the champagne bottle, pop that cork, do not do it. Donald Trump is very much in this race. If we have a polling shift like we've seen in prior years from now until the final result, Donald Trump would actually win. I'm not saying that's going to happen.
Right. And that is, of course, the easiest conservative excuse that we can run with and say, well, the polls have always underestimated Trump, hence they're going to do it again. And when you factor that in mind, Trump is actually doing much better than he did in prior election cycles. Now, I will also point out maybe that is not foolproof logic at the same time, because, hey, just because the polls underestimated Trump in the past doesn't mean they're going to do it again. So I am certainly not using that as an excuse to get complacent, but it is kind of valid to think about, because especially you think about a state like Wisconsin, where the rural areas that vote for Trump are notoriously hard to poll, and for years the polls there have been underestimating Republicans. There is reason to believe, I'm not saying it's completely true, but there's reason to believe that perhaps they are doing it again, and that's the first thing to keep in mind, but there are many others, so take a listen to some more of this.
Happen, but I am saying that he is very much in this ball game based upon where he is right now, and compare that to where he was in prior years.
We certainly heard the Harris campaign saying we have to keep fighting.
Absolutely.
This is definitely not over. All right, let's talk about enthusiasm and how that translates actually. We are quite a ways out, again, 3 months about.
Yeah, yesterday I was mentioning, the enthusiasm for the Democratic ticket was up.
Yep.
But that enthusiasm is not the same thing as going out to actually vote. And there's a different question, which essentially says, how certain are you actually going to go out and vote? And this is the top range. Almost certain to vote. Again, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. This is among registered voters. Look at this. Look at Kamala Harris now compared to where Joe Biden was back in May. In fact, 62% of Joe Biden voters said they were almost certain to turn out and vote. Now,
it's gone down.
It's actually gone down a little bit. I would call this in the same general area at 61%. But it's basically unchanged. And look at Donald Trump. He was at 58% in May. He's actually gone up a little bit now. He's at 60% now. Again, basically no real change. So the bottom line here is, yes, there may be more enthusiasm for Kamala Harris, but the fact is we're not seeing that necessarily translate in the almost certain vote. And one little other note, Sarah, I will note this. Donald Trump is more popular today than he was on August 13th in either 2020 or 2016. So the bottom line is, yes, Kamala Harris is doing better in the polls, but there's a long way to go. The polls can shift. The almost certain to vote hasn't actually shifted, and Donald Trump is more popular than he was at either 2016 or 2020 at this point.
Those are interesting data points, Harry Enten. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kate?
So yeah, I'm obviously not using this as an excuse to say everything is fine, we should have no concerns. No, of course we should have concerns, but it's important to make those concerns level and reasonable, which is, hey, not every poll you see is necessarily going to be accurate. They're also a snapshot in time, which means see how they're doing in a month, right? Because you're also dealing with something called response bias. And by the way, this is not a new phenomenon. This has happened for Democrats in the summer of virtually every past presidential election of the past couple decades. And you didn't really see it for Joe Biden, but the moment that Kamala stepped in, you did, which is in a lot of these polls, when you read through the crosstab, see who is being sampled, the identifying as liberal or hardcore Democrat portion of the electorate is magically going up like 10 to 15 points. And so you ask the question, what happened there? Did America magically become 10 to 15% more liberal overnight? Or is it more likely that because of the current enthusiasm around Kamala Harris, around the honeymoon, maybe when pollsters call the phones or email or do whatever they do, the liberals, the enthusiastic Kamala Harris supporters are more likely to pick up or respond to that poll, whereas in reality, when we get down to the election itself, that is not necessarily true. Again, this is not a new phenomenon. It happened for Joe Biden in 2020, where around this time he was up nationally by like 7 points. Hillary Clinton back in 2016, this time of the year, similar scenario. So, the CNN guy did not necessarily bring that up, but that is also something to keep in mind. Which again, despite the accusations that detractors are going to throw at me, this is not me saying, oh, the polls are fake and everything is astroturf. It's like, no, there are just factors that, by the way, are not new factors. They are historical factors that may be playing into why Kamala Harris is seeing a surge that may not translate to November. Now, again, is that me saying, oh, we should just get complacent and, run like Kamala Harris shouldn't be concerning to us at all? No, absolutely not. But these are just things to consider. And again, don't just take it from me, take it from CNN and the Democrats. Recently, David Axelrod, who is a former strategist for Obama, big time sort of Democrat inner circle guy, went on CNN to essentially say that whatever you're seeing in the public polls, internally, the internal polls that are being run by the Kamala Harris campaign actually do not even show her winning the election to begin with. Take a listen to that as well.
I thought they had this race under control. It is much more of a contest now.
Yeah, and look, she has a lot of momentum, but if you do look at the polling, this is still a really tight race. This is going to be a hard fight for either side, a tough, based on the numbers we're seeing right now.
100%. Look, I mean, anyone, there's a lot of irrational exuberance on the side of on the Democratic side of the aisle right now because there was despair for some period of time about what the November was going to look like. Now people feel like there's a chance. But it is absolutely Trump's race to lose right now. He is ahead, and he is ahead most of the battleground states. They're close. They could be won by either candidate. But there is a lot to be determined in the next 90 whatever days, 96 or whatever it is left. Yeah, I think it's a wide open race. But Trump has the advantage right now, and everybody should be sober about that on the Democratic side.
Yeah, and to that.
Yes, obviously, it's all going to come down to turnout. This is going to be a close election. Can we turn out our base better than them? And can we also win a little bit more independent voters than Kamala Harris on top of that, which I don't know if Kamala is necessarily that strong with independents, so that is something also to consider. And let's talk about that turnout of every candidate's base, because I certainly think, yes, for Democrat enthusiasm, replacing it with Kamala is definitely much better than if they ran Biden. However, recently a guest on MSNBC went on the network to explain that her support with minorities, right, with blacks, Hispanics, etc., kind of a core constituency of the Democratic base, if you will, has not actually significantly gone up in comparison to Joe Biden. Check it out.
With young people, is there any data on that?
So what's interesting is that young voters and also ended up black voters didn't change all that much between where Biden was in Pennsylvania in July and where Harris is now. Independents did move in Harris's direction.
So that's another factor to consider, is if Kamala Harris is not doing better than Joe Biden with the minorities, the young people, etc., then you have to assume in order to replicate Joe Biden's alleged 2020 victory, she would have to do equal to Joe Biden with the Rust Belt, let's say white working class voters. And I think it's kind of common sense, but I think we will find to be true that Kamala Harris will not do as well as Biden did with the white working class in 2020. She needs to increase minority turnout, young turnout, etc., etc. And if she's not able to do that, which according to this recent guest on MSNBC, then regardless of whatever frontline headline page you see about the polls and the number at the very top, if she is not doing better with the Democrats' base core constituencies, then she's going to either have to pull off some type of miracle with the white working class, or she's just not in a good position to win the election. Last thing I'll say, let's talk about the polls here that actually matter. The only numbers that we can say definitively show something for certain, which is the advantage and the increase in voter registration. And check this out. From July 2024 to August 2024, despite all of the hype you may have heard, here are the numbers from the swing states that do report this data. Now, keep in mind, not every state reports voter registration by party, but of the ones that do, change from July, let's say in the state of Pennsylvania, Republicans went up in voter registration by 21,000. Democrats only went up by close to 6,000. We are beating them in the voter registration game in terms of the increasing, in terms of building new voters. In North Carolina, Republicans gained over 6,000 new voters. Democrats actually lost 700. So you hear a lot of chatter from the Kamala campaign about how North Carolina is in play right now. Look at this poll, look at that poll. But on the ground, in terms of the ground game, that might not necessarily be true. And in Nevada, this is not very big, but Nevada is also a smaller state. From July, Republicans gained almost 1,000 new voters. Democrats only gained 984. And here is a chart of all of the states that do report voter registration, as you can see. And in most of the country, right, Republicans are right here, Democrats are right here. In most of the country, as you can see, Republicans are beating the Democrats when it comes to new voter registrations. Check this out. Another swing state like Arizona, Republicans here gained almost 20,000 new voters in the month of July. Democrats only gained 3,400. And the story goes on and on. So look here, folks, in closing, I'm going to reiterate what I said at the beginning of this video. Should we be concerned about the election? Yes, absolutely. Frankly, we should have been concerned even when Joe Biden was the candidate. But yes, nobody denies the race just got a lot closer. And right now, it really is anyone's race to win. And we cannot take that for granted. We cannot take that lightly. But at the same time, the idea that Trump is in total trouble, like the campaign is doing nothing, Kamala Harris is going to destroy him, again, that is also not true. And we should not necessarily freak out at the polls. We should be concerned. We should take a look at them. We shouldn't just say they're all fake without, reading into them. But at the same time, don't buy too much into the hype, into the AstroTurf campaign. And if I were to guess, it's very likely eventually Kamala Harris is going to have to answer questions. Her honeymoon's going to wear off, and we'll see where the race is from there, especially after Labor Day when the campaign heats up. That said, folks, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, follow me on social media and X, link in the the description. And until next time, God bless and peace.